Hello, everyone. Welcome to the DraftKings Daily Trot. I am Big Italy 42 here with Scott Mailwig at sports_25 to life on Twitter. And we're going to talk about tonight's action, MLB on DraftKings. And we got 8 games on tap. We'll go ahead and give you the little weather concern at first. LA at Texas, looking like 55 to 70% chance of rain all night. It's a flash flood warning, so big time concern there. And a little bit of rain concern as well. Miami at Atlanta, but it looks like that one may actually still get played. I mean, obviously, the Texas game could still get played, but looking on the wrong side of likely right now.
Yeah, definitely. We're just going to have to watch that weather. We got a lot of time before these games start, though, so that's nice. We should get a decent amount more information around 3 or 4. So we'll have a good idea before the game starts, I think, if that game's going to be played or not.
Yeah, exactly. So plenty of time. Make sure to check back on that, but we are going to highlight a couple guys from that game because it is a nice target for tonight's action. So we're going to start off with starting pitcher here, where you get a nice discount on my favorite pitcher of the day, Scott Kazmir, $7,200 tonight at Houston. Yes, there's some big right-handed bats to oppose the lefty in Houston, but there's also a ton of bats who like to swing and miss. So that puts Kazmir in a nice spot tonight in this matchup. Small favorite on the road, but I'm a big fan of his tonight, especially that price tag tonight on DraftKings.
Yeah, definitely. He's right up there for me also. Another guy that looks like you get a little bit of a discount on him on DraftKings is Lester. He had a rough start the first game, but I think he should be in pretty good shape today. I think the Reds were, second to last against lefties last year?
Yeah, pretty terrible.
So I really like this matchup in general for him. The Reds are really lefty-heavy with Votto and all these other guys. I feel pretty good about him today. I don't really love paying up for a pitcher when you mentioned Kazmir is in a really good spot, and Shelby Miller is the other guy that I think has a really nice price on DraftKings. He's $7,100 on DraftKings. And he pitched pretty good in his first start. He only went 5 innings. He's not really that dominant type guy that I really like to throw out there for the most part, but I like the price a little bit if we're looking to get away from Kazmir a bit here. But I agree with you. I think he's the top pitcher on the slate.
Yeah, I agree. And a couple other guys I'm looking at. Michael Pineda in a tough matchup, but was tough against lefties and righties. Not a ton of upside. His strikeout rate about average, so he's in play. Brandon McCarthy keeps the ball on the ground. I don't think he's a bad play, but once again, not a ton of upside, but should have decent amount of safety. And upside guys that I'd normally be targeting, guys like Jake Odorizzi, not a chance I'm touching him in the Rogers Center against all those big bats tonight. His fly ball tendencies, 48.7% fly ball last year.
Yeah.
So I'm on the other side of that matchup today. I'm getting myself some Toronto bats.
Yeah, definitely. GPPs, the only guy that I'm my long shot guy is Matt Latos. I think he's going to be crazy low owned after he got kind of pummeled in his first start. I just like his strikeout upside. We've seen him be really solid in the past. I think he's just one of those guys that's like a GPP dart for me more than anything, but I like his upside here.
Absolutely. And if there weren't weather concerns, Matt Shoemaker's got nice strikeout upside, but not a chance I'm touching a pitcher in that scenario as it looks right now. All right, moving on here to catcher. We've got a couple options. I like Brian McCann against a lefty at Baltimore. He's at $4,000. Still don't like paying that price tag for Brian McCann because he is Brian McCann. But if I'm going to do it, it's going to be against a lefty and, a slightly above average one in Wei-Yin Chen. But I like that matchup for him. Russell Martin's pretty pricey, but already mentioned I like these Toronto bats. He's at $4,400. Who else are you looking at here behind the plate?
Yeah, Martin I was looking really hard at because he's the only guy that really stands out to me. But that $4,400 price tag is it just feels too high for me to feel really good about it outside of GPPs. I'm fine taking the risk on that price in GPPs, but in cash games, $4,400 is just crazy for Martin for me. The other guy I'm looking at is Gaddis. I don't love him, but I mean, catcher is probably the toughest position on the late slate today. There's just not a lot to like there.
Yeah.
I might be looking at some lineups when they come out and trying to find a value play at catcher. Honestly, that's going to be probably my solution for cash games unless something changes here with somebody else. But like you said, Martin, Gaddis, and then value plays for me. I'm hoping somebody's in the lineup that I'm not expecting or something like that I can get for really cheap.
Yeah, and I'm with you there. I mean, that's a good point. And guys like Rene Rivera, Derek Norris, bat either really high in the order or really low in the order.
Yep.
So maybe look at those guys, see if one of those gets slot in the 2-hole. Maybe you can get him in there for a little bit cheaper. Those guys both right around $3,500. And one more tournament guy, Devin Mesoraco's got a ton of power, $3,900. One of the few guys like Gaddis with some double dong upside there at catcher. And as we know, Wynn likes to blow out at Wrigley at times. So, maybe he gets a hold of one against Lester, but certainly not a cash game play for me in that matchup.
Yeah, same.
All right, moving on to first base here. I already mentioned Toronto bats. I'm going to do it again. Edwin Encarnacion, one of my favorite options if I'm going to pay up here. I like Pujols, but he's got a really expensive price tag, weather concerns. So for me, top option is going to be Encarnacion against Odorizzi here.
Yeah, that's a top guy for me too. Like you said, the weather concerns in the Angels game make it tough because I like Pujols and Cron in this game, honestly.
Yeah.
It's starting to annoy me that I can't stack the part of that lineup that I want to with both of these guys all the time. But yeah, I like this for GPPs if the weather clears up a little bit. I think both of those guys are great plays. I'm probably going to play Encarnacion if it looks like that game's going to get rained out, though. There's not a lot I'm really confident in at first base either outside of Encarnacion. I think he's far and away the best play.
Yeah, I agree there. And I will say this, in some small buy-in tournaments, if there's indication that the game may play but be delayed, I'm going to go ahead and still stack my Angels and just hope and pray.
I'm going to do the same thing. Yeah, I mean, it's a really solid strategy for cheap tournaments because, I mean, they're going to be so low-owned if we're not going to know what that weather is going to be like. And I mean, like I said, the only problem with that is that I really want to play a lineup with Pujols and Cron in it, and you just can't do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's definitely an interesting strategy. If you're not too worried about throwing away $8-10, throwing a couple small tournaments, take your chance. Worst case, you lose a couple bucks.
Yeah.
Best case, no one's got them. So I do like that strategy in some GPPs. And looking elsewhere at first base, like you said, not a whole lot to be in love with here. If you want a cheap guy, Ike Davis should be back in the lineup. He had a couple and some nice spots there. He's at 2,800 in a nice matchup against Feldman there. So I don't mind him. Outside of that, I'm probably going to get Encarnacion in most of my lineups where I can afford
Yeah, right.
Because, I mean, not a lot of expensive pitchers like we already mentioned. So you can get the expensive batters you want in your lineups pretty easily.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, moving on to second base here. If you want your stolen base upside, you got D. Gordon, but I would prefer Jose Altuve. Great against the lefty. Obviously, if you're playing Kazmir, especially on DraftKings, you don't want to be playing hitters against him with negatives for hits and walks. But Altuve, one of the better hitters in the game, bat over 400. Actual batting average, not WOBA last year, against left-handed pitching. So you don't love the matchup because Kazmir is a fine lefty, but at the same time, Altuve, one of those guys you can kind of just slot in there against a lefty if you're not playing him, and he's in a great spot.
Yeah, definitely. Couple of guys I'm looking at in this one at second base are, I mean, obviously Altuve is probably the top play here. You have to feel really good about him. Zobrist is the guy that I've been playing Zobrist a ton early this season. Yeah, he's been really cheap, especially on FanDuel. On DraftKings, he's up to 4,400 today, I think, but I still feel okay about that. He gives you that power upside at second base that I always really like. I don't mind Sogard either, actually. I think he's a pretty decent play here. Feldman's a pretty low-K pitcher, and when these guys are hitting, I mean, if they're not striking out, they're making good contact. I feel pretty good about them today. Sogard has a much, much better price, 3,200. It'll be interesting to see where he's hitting in the order, though, because he's been moving around a little bit.
Yeah, completely agree with you there. And one more guy I'm going to highlight, but he has dual eligibility, and I think I'll be playing him at shortstop because I really don't like many options there. Is Asdrubal Cabrera at $3,900 against Dickey. Batting in the two-hole. We know how it is with the knuckleballer. It's either great or it's terrible. Not much of in between. Cabrera's a nice contact hitter. We know Dickey, not much a strikeout hitter in his 35th season in the majors now. So I do like him, but like I said, I'll probably play him at shortstop instead.
Yeah, he's my top play at shortstop. So why don't we just segue right into shortstop?
We'll move over there, and that. So there's number one. You also have Jose Reyes if you want to go with your Toronto bats.
Yeah, Reyes has been one of the top options basically every day. I mean, he's had a really nice start to the season. A little bit more under the radar guy. I like Eric Ibar, but I mean, we're worried about the same thing with him. So that's a little concerning.
Yeah.
But I like Ibar. I'd really like to be able to play him. I think Cabrera is definitely the top play at shortstop, though. There's a lot more options at second base, especially value-wise, that I feel good about. And that 3,900 price tag on Cabrera is just feels really solid today.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there. So, I mean, it looks like it's going to be him and Encarnacion, two guys I'm going to be having heavily owned. Seems like the same on your end. And like I mentioned, I mean, D. Gordon, another guy that you could also play at shortstop if you want that upside. I mean, not the best matchup in the world, but I mean, as we know, we can rack up points in a hurry. I mean, 5 points for a stolen base on DraftKings. That can pay off your tag pretty quickly with a single, and you know he's going to be trying.
Yeah, exactly. With both Reyes and D. Gordon, I mean, I feel pretty good about the speed there, especially upside wise. It's just hard to pay a little bit more for them when Cabrera has a nice matchup and he's only 3,900, and so that's why I'm leaning really heavily towards him.
Yeah, absolutely there. And now we're gonna move on to third base, where you've got some top options. Another guy into concern, Adrian Beltre. If he's playing, you like him. You don't know if he's gonna play, so monitor that. But the guy I really like as a pivot off of him is Chase Headley. I don't love the $4,200 price tag. Wish he was a little cheaper, but got nice splits against lefties. Mentioned Chin, barely above average pitcher. Not a terrible pitcher, but Baltimore not a bad hitter's ballpark either. And he's been getting a premier lineup spot. Should be right around fifth in the order today. So I'm a big fan of Headley tonight.
Yeah, I mean, third base is really weird today. It seems like everybody's on the wrong side of their splits. I mean, there's some really tough pitching matchups out there. So I'm looking at some cheaper guys. Brett Lowry is a guy that I'm looking at. He's been a little bit of a roller coaster so far this season, where he's had a couple of really nice games and a couple terrible ones where he's looked awful. I like where Lowry's sitting in the order. The other really cheap guy I like is Solarte. He's 3,000, I believe, on DraftKings. Is that right? Let me look real quick. Yeah, that's right. I couldn't tell if it said 38 or 30 on my sheet here. But yeah, 3,000. I like him quite a bit. He's been hitting pretty high in the order. I'd want to confirm that he's there just because they've been moving that order around a little bit. But I feel pretty good about him today, especially for that price at a position like we mentioned. There's really not a lot of great matchups at.
Yeah, and I really like that call. And I talked about with Spencer on the FanDuel podcast, seems like the Padres are a sneaky stack here because Robbie De La Rosa, pretty awful equally against lefties and righties. And obviously not a ton of power outside the big bats there with San Diego. But, I mean, no one's going to be playing that stack. So maybe a mini stack, throw that in a tournament. It is a low total. Everyone's going to be off it. But some of these guys, guys like Solarte, slap hitters, they get hit in the gap. I'm a Maurice to these guys. Quickly turns into a triple or double. And I like that as a contrarian way to go.
Yeah, I just like the price. Like we said, there's not a lot of really high price guys to go after. Lowry's starting to get up there in price a little bit. I think he's almost 1,000 more, so I like it as a value play away from those guys.
Definitely. And moving over to the outfield, where we're seeing the second highest price we've seen of any player at any position, not starting pitchers so far this year. Mike Trout up at a whopping $6,600. After he was a discount, he was the sixth highest outfielder last time he played. Now up to $6,600, but fortunately we might not need to worry about Mike Trout tonight if he's not playing. But at $6,600, I mean, that's a steep tag, but still not that difficult to get him in your lineup with some of these other guys if you're paying $7 to $8K for most of your pitchers.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where I'm looking at pitcher today for the most part. So it definitely makes it pretty easy to get him in there. Who's the other guy I like? Oh, Mitch Moreland was the other guy I liked in that also.
Yeah.
I like his price a little bit. It's gone up a decent amount. He's a much better play on FanDuel. I don't know if you guys covered him on the FanDuel one, but I like Moreland a decent amount. I like him against righties pretty much all the time.
Yeah.
Matt Shoemaker is, I mean, iffy at best.
He's above average in strikeout rate and beard, and that's about it.
Yeah, right, exactly. Which makes him really fun to watch, but not so fun to roster.
Yeah, exactly. And Jose Bautista in a fine spot against a fly ball pitcher too. Always double dong upside with him. And elsewhere, like I was saying with Spencer on the other podcast, I'm not a huge fan of paying up for most of these guys today because most of the expensive bats just aren't in great spots, don't have handedness advantage, things of that nature. But there were some cheap guys that I did like. You got Travis Snyder if he's got a nice lineup spot again. We've seen him 3rd, 5th, 7th. He's at 4,100. I don't mind him. Everyone who knows me now knows that I love Kevin Kiermaier and always have. So at 4,100, if he's leading off again, I'll give him a nod as well. And one other guy I wanted to mention here, and he's a righty specialist, and he better be in the lineup today. Seth Smith at $3,600. I like him a lot too. Yeah,
definitely. One guy I like that's kind of cheap is Sam Fuld. I think he's got a decent matchup today. His price is a little bit higher than I want it to be, but that's how I feel about most people on DraftKings these days. I just really need to start adjusting to these fluctuations in price a little bit, where all the guys I want are a little bit higher than I want them to be.
They're doing a great job of keeping it tight this year.
Yeah, they really are, because, I mean, every time I look at a guy, I'm like, I wish he was $300 cheaper.
Yep.
But, I mean, it makes it tough. It keeps the
brings back
ownership percentages down. Yep, definitely. And so, I mean, it's hard to argue with. Another guy I kind of like that's in that potential rainout is Leonis Martin. I would really like that game to be played. And like you said, it's going to be fun to stack that game if it looks a little iffy in tournaments. So there's a ton of guys to like in that game. It's kind of unfortunate that that's the one we got to worry about the rain with.
Definitely. There's one more guy I want to mention who it seems like DraftKings didn't catch up on pricing on this one. Alejandro De Aza. Leading off, he's at $3,000 right now. Off to a great start this season. He's already hit a couple home runs. Strikes out too much, but you don't really care about that on DraftKings. No negatives for outs, regardless of how they happen. So I like him a great deal in tournaments, and I feel like if people aren't looking down, I always look at the cheap guys. One of the first things I do when I'm looking at each day. And you got to point out guys like that. I mean, you look at the players around him, and I mean, it's a bunch of guys who don't even start most days.
Yeah, exactly. And you're getting a power speed combo out of him, and like you said, without the strikeouts factoring in, it's just a really nice position for him.
Yeah, absolutely. One more cheap guy, if you want to mention him, hit a home run a couple days ago. Really not a whole lot of upside unless he gets on. I mean, he's got a little bit of speed. Not a very good hitter though. Cameron Maybin, $2,700. If he's got a nice lineup spot, don't mind him either.
Yeah, the problem with him is he's got to get on base, exactly. And he doesn't do that very often, right? One other guy that I was looking at a little bit again is Eric Young, another value play for me. I think he's 3,400 today. I think that's pretty solid. He's been hitting leadoff for the Braves. I mean, the biggest problem with them is their lineup just hasn't gotten it going yet, and frankly, they weren't really projected to get it going. But hitting the top spot pretty often, hitting the top spot pretty often for 3,400. He doesn't have the power that De Aza has, so I definitely prefer De Aza there. But 3,400 there is another nice value play against Latos, who we know is prone to blow up from time to time.
Yeah. And Young, one of the better base stealers in the game, once he gets on. So he's got that upside as well. And that's a really underrated aspect, especially DraftKings with the heavily weighted stolen bases there. You get your speed, combine it with your power with some safe pitching, and you should be good to go, especially on a night like tonight with 8 games.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, that's going to wrap things up for us here. We've got a FanDuel podcast as well. We've got a premium podcast coming up with Scott and I here. We'll be up in a little bit as well. Check out our great content at dailyfantasycafe.com. We'll see you guys again tomorrow.